We are going to taste some cheese for those of you who want to. Don't worry, I can't see all of you, so I'm not forcing anybody to taste any cheese you don't want to, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. My name is Kendall Antonelli, and I own a cheese shop here in Austin. And I said cheese, as in the cheese in front of you. People always think I say tea. I don't know why one is less weird than the other. I did go to a lot of school and do a lot of other things to become something else, and somehow I quit all of that in life and ended up becoming a cheesemonger. So that is a different, longer story. But my husband and I just celebrated our 10-year anniversary at business. So our business has been open 10 years. And in that time, we have won Best Austin Eats, Travel and Leisure, which is a big magazine in the United States, named us one of the best cheese shops in America. We've gotten to go to New Zealand and England and Italy and France and judge cheese competitions all over the world. And we've gotten to take our kids. And then in these last few years, we've really won a handful of awards. Most recently, I won Austin Under 40, which is like the Austinites who are under 40 years old who are making the biggest impact in Austin. And then I also won from something called the Austin Business Journal, a big award called a Profile in Power. So I guess you could say from the outside peering in that we look like the in kids right now, and that we are, I don't know, winning a lot of awards. So the reason I tell you that is I wouldn't have ever guessed that 20 years ago. I guess if I take you back, my story and where I'm coming from and what we're going to talk about, since you're probably not prepped for it, is I am a survivor of depression. I was diagnosed with clinical depression when I was in college. I was hospitalized after a very scary night, and I spent a lot of time in a mental ward facility behind locked doors. It is not something that I am. Well, that's jumping ahead. I don't want to jump ahead. But if you're like, dang, I can't believe she just said that. Well, there's number one. I just say it. And later, nowadays, I'm 38. The more I say it, the better it makes me feel. And the more people come out and say, wow, you really? That's what, I would have never guessed you've had those problems or those issues. So taking it back, I mean, I had a decent childhood, but I also had a pretty difficult relationship with my father that was pretty challenging. There are some things that I'm grateful for about it, and I think that is also what makes it very sticky for me, is I couldn't just hate him either for some of the difficult stuff that we went through. And anyways, on and off in my childhood, I was in and out of therapists. And by the time I got to college, three things happened pretty quickly. My mom was diagnosed with cancer, which she survived, but she and I were really close. She raised me as a single mom. My grandmother, who had also helped raise me, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and deteriorated pretty quickly. And then my dad unexpectedly dropped dead and passed away. And all of that kind of surmounted to be a catalyst. And my boyfriend, who we were never good together anyway, and I knew that, but we broke up, and I saw that he was with another girl one night, and I just lost it. And it was just all too much for me. So I only tell that, and I'm glad that y'all are there, because when I share that story, it's a lot of information and some heavy stuff to do in a really quick time without any buildup, and it can be pretty triggering to people too. So I always say that there's lots of resources out there available to folks, and I'm glad that you're where you're at, because if that was triggering in some way, you can talk about it, and I'm happy to answer any questions I can later too. But all of that is to say, I think if you look from the outside looking in, you would think, like I seriously would never guess it. I don't have a white picket fence. That's just a little too cliche for me. But if you come look at our house, I have a nice house in the center of Austin with a little fence around it. I was the first of my friends to get married. I was the first to have kids, and I would have never picked that for myself. I thought I would have been the one, I don't know, crazy by myself in some country on some island. And so all I say is that from the outside looking in, you would think this girl is perfect, is successful, she's clearly happy, and she has no problems. And instead, I want to make sure that people know that I think we're all beautifully messed up, and we all have our respective challenges and issues going on. Some are definitely harder than others. But I just like to put it out there because whenever I tell my story, people are always like, you? And I still have girlfriends to this day that will claim nothing is wrong. Their marriage is perfect. Their children are perfect. Their lives are perfect. I'm like, oh, one, that's got to be pretty boring. But two, I don't believe it for a second. And instead, I've found it being pretty empowering. The more that I share my story, people come out and they're like, wow, me too. And then in these conversations start happening in these small rooms in small areas that you can have gone through struggles and still also be successful, that they don't have to be mutually exclusive. They can be one and the same, that you can be successful and struggling at the exact same time. And to that end, I would say that this pandemic has been very challenging for me as a survivor of depression. I'm somebody who needs to get out, and I don't do different things. I'm grateful that I have a yard I can go sit in, but if I was locked up in an apartment, a lot of our family live in Manhattan and New York, and they can't get out of their apartments. And so I'm grateful for that. But at the same time, not having alone time away from my fabulous children, and they are fabulous, y'all, but they're a lot. They're very spirited. My daughter is giving me a run for my money, just as I'm sure I did to my mom. There's been a lot of challenges, and you've heard a lot of talk about the pandemic being really hard for everybody's mental health. And so it's something that I'm having to keep watch of. And it's not that this was a fixed point in time, like it was only that time of my life. Instead, it's something that I have to check in with myself every once in a while. For instance, when we got pregnant, I didn't even think to ask, but my husband reminded me, and we asked the doctor, like, hey, I have a history of depression. What do I need to look at for postpartum? So the good news is, for me, it was a journey, and I have moved through that phase. And at the same time, I know tips nowadays to take care of myself, to always be mentally checking in with, am I going down a path that is hurtful to myself? Is it where I want to go? And how can I kind of right the ship? And it's something that when I was younger, I couldn't right the ship. I'd know when I was going off, but I just didn't feel like I had the skills to right it. And now through lots of work, I realized, I had those skills all along. And now I know what it takes to be able to kind of get personally myself back on course. And if we want to talk in the Q&A about some of that, I'm happy to do that too, about what that looks like for me, but I know it's different for everybody. So as we take it home before you eat some cheese, I think the biggest lessons that I've learned in life are that oftentimes it's my own limiting beliefs. The limiting belief is when you tell yourself something over and over that you start to believe it. And so you're limiting your own capabilities. And instead, if you go back and question that fundamental underlying assumption, you're like, was that really true? Does everybody hate me? Was I really all alone when I thought I was all alone? The hard part for me about depression, and it's all sorts of mental health issues, but was that I felt really, really ashamed. I felt really alone. Things are a little bit better these days. 20 years ago, there was a huge stigma of even talking about it. And there was sort of I can't tell anybody this has happened to me, or I'll never get a job. This is something that we keep secret. And instead, the more that I initially started sharing it when I did a lot of work with a therapist, which therapy was really hard for me. My sister recently, she's going through some hard stuff, and I recommended therapy, and she went one time and she said, that sucked. I'm not going back again. And I laughed because I was like, yeah, I mean, I think it's different for everybody, but for me, it wasn't that I loved going to therapy, but it personally gave me tools, and I got used to telling my own story. And then I became comfortable with my own story. And it doesn't mean that there aren't things about my past that still upset me or piss me off, or that I wish were different. However, in regularly talking about it, I know those emotions, I can name them, and they don't feel like such a shameful, dirty part of my past. They feel just as a part of me as everything else, and a part of my journey, and I'm able to talk about it. And that has only come, some people say, how can you talk about this so cavalierly? Well, it's 20 years later, but so it's only come from me talking about it at first with the therapist a lot. And then, as you know, I have no filter. I tell anybody, like I walk into a room like, hey, I've survived depression. I'm a mental health survivor, which is a lot for people to handle. In fact, fun side story, the first date I went on with my husband, which was my now husband. It was after 6 or 7 or 8 months of pretty intensive therapy. But on our first date, I just said, look, here's everything that anybody has ever said wrong with me, and it's part of who I am, and you can take it or leave it. And he said, all right, that sounds good. We could work with that. And to me, that was, looking back, one of the most powerful moments for me personally, because I just put it all out there and I didn't have anything to be afraid of or anything to be ashamed of. And he could take me or leave me. And it wouldn't have made who I was. And luckily, I guess today he decided to stick with me. And now I've never had a secret from him because he's known all those things about me. So again, there's different strokes for different folks, and everybody's story is unique to themselves. But for me, in sharing my story over and over, it has helped be part of my journey. Sharing my story has helped me own it and claim it, and fear no longer holds a space over me. That's been really big for me, both seeking through that professional help and then being with you all here today and talking with friends and other people who will talk about it. It also helps me to know that, as I said earlier, success and struggle are the same coin, that you can be one in both at the same time, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. Raise your hand, you don't really have to, but who has heard time heals all wounds? Anybody? Who has heard this too shall pass? Right, I'm sure. So I have heard those all the time, and it's always from well-meaning folks, and they are absolutely right. But when you're stuck in that moment, it doesn't help, because you're like, I get it. I get you're saying that I'm going to get through this someday out there, but I can't even fathom what that looks like because I'm stuck right here in this hole. And so one thing that has that feeling of being stuck can be really burdensome and feel really heavy. And something that helps me now in life is I just always think of things as a journey, and that helps me know that I'm always moving, even if I don't feel it. And I'll always be moving through this. And so there is another phase that will come. And I like when things get hard for me, this is kind of dumb, but I think of myself as the heroine of my own adventure. Like I don't know if you've ever seen Lord of the Rings, but Lord of the Rings or something like that. And so I come upon this really hard challenge, and then I tell myself, oh yeah, this is the part in the movie where she's being tested for all she's got, and I just have to make it through this thing, and then the bright thing is on the other side of that, or at least a good night's sleep or something is on the other side of that. All right, so with that, I think we should taste some cheese so y'all can laugh or say it was the stinkiest or most delicious cheese you've ever tasted. If you have your little cheese plate in front of you, your bread and the big white plop one that looks like an ice cream scoop, it should be we're gonna go down, so it should be at the top. So I'm gonna eat mine like this and go down this way. And then you have your little menu cards right here to tell you what they are. So as our quick tasting, I wanted to show you the difference in a cow, a goat, and a sheep. So we make cheeses. We don't personally make cheeses. My husband and I, our mission is to do good, eat good. And it means we buy cheeses from smaller artisans or people making cheese traditionally all over the world. And so cheese can be made from cow's milk, is what you've most often had. If you've ever had a piece of cheddar or mozzarella on pizza or Parmesan on spaghetti. But it can also be made from goat's milk and sheep's milk, and they all taste pretty different. So goat's milk tastes more really tangy, and sometimes like you took a little bit of a bite out of a lime. It can taste a little grassy. So if you want, go ahead and give that first one a bite and just taste it. I just like to taste it, as I say, naked by itself, so I get to know what it tastes like. I like this with pickles a lot, but this is the fresh chev. So it just means it's a fresh goat's milk cheese. And this one is made locally out at Pure Luck Farm and Dairy by our friends Amelia. I'm doing awesome. All right, so then our next cheese is this one. Yay! Does it look like the cheese is talking? This is Caña de Oveja. I've seen this maker too. We got to go to Spain last summer to visit and travel to see her. It's a female maker, your second female cheese maker. It's a bloomy rind cheese. So that means they introduce a mold to the outside that blooms like little white cotton balls all around it, and you pick it up and pat it down. And basically the purpose of that mold is to break down the proteins inside the cheese. So do you see how there's that mold on the outside, or that's called the rind. Then you have that cream line underneath it, which is really yellow. And then you have the inner chalky paste. This cheese is Caña de Oveja, which just means log of the sheep or sheep log. And sheep's milk is known for being the richest and the fattiest. If you've ever had manchego or pecorino on pizza, it's a sheep's milk cheese. I love watching people eat cheese. Y'all are so funny. Okay, I'm not joking now, I promise. So this one, sometimes it doesn't taste like, but it has the texture of peanut butter in your mouth because it's so dense and chalky. You just kind of chew it. And earlier this year, we got picked up on BuzzFeed because we did a candy and cheese pairing. So I put this with this artisanal chocolate bar. If anybody likes Almond Joys or Mounds, there's no almonds in this, but this is caramel, coconut, and a cookie wrapped in chocolate. And so I love chocolate with goat's milk cheese. And I just kind of eat them back and forth. My husband likes to put it right on top of it and eat it. But sheep's milk cheese is known for being so rich that it really goes with like big, bold, bitter flavors of chocolate. And then lastly, to round it out, before we see if you have any questions, this last one is Alpblossom. So this is a cow's milk cheese, which comes from Austria. The reason it's called Alpblossom is it's an alpine cheese. It's made in the mountains in the Alps. These alpine cheeses are super special because they're known for right when the first winter snows melt up in the mountains, they take the cows up mountainside, and it's a lot of labor. Somebody just walks the cows up the mountain and lets them graze on all of this really diverse and different grasses and wildflowers. So that makes a more interesting milk, and that milk flavor comes out in the cheese. So these are known for being, I'm gonna taste a bite with you, but usually like nutty, like broth, like sometimes I think the insides of these taste like, if any of you have had ramen noodles, I freaking love ramen noodles, not the ones in the cup. I like the ones with a lot of sodium that are like dried that you put in the microwave. This tastes like the broth of that. So like beef broth, bouillon cube, like a chicken bouillon cube. I wouldn't say yet you're quite master cheese tasters, but that was your first 101. That congratulations. I will send you a certificate. You have all survived. Way to go, ladies. If you think any of these are stinky, I was being nice with all these. Stinky cheeses, oftentimes we say they're a cheesemonger's favorite because they really smell, but they don't taste as bad as they smell. So a lot of times people just don't even give them a chance because we say that the bark is louder than the bite. So they smell more aggressive than they taste. But if you like them and you taste them, and some of them can be pretty strong too, those wash rind cheeses, they taste really meaty. So, and I'm a girl, my parents were cattle ranchers. I like beef, I like bacon, I like all those things. So wash rind cheeses taste really meaty. They taste like you're eating meat or cured salamis. So, and I like putting them with hearty mustards or that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I think the allure is different for different folks. Also, those wash rind cheeses are known in the winter for, you can like really melt them on pickles and make fondue out of them. And so they're just really savory, unctuous cheeses. For anybody who's the youngest out there, you can claim actually that you have the best palate though, because as we age, we lose our taste buds. Our taste buds die off and we never get them back. So, you know, when a kid is like, ew, I don't like my Brussels sprouts, it's because they can taste it way better than we can when we're older. So you have more taste buds when you're born than when you die. But yeah, I think you develop a different appreciation. I mean, before I opened a cheese shop, I don't know, one, I didn't even know what a stinky cheese was, so I wouldn't have been able to tell you if I liked it or not. But two, I probably would have just thought something was wrong with it. And that, you know, usually our bodies, if something stinks, we're like, our bodies are telling us, stay away from it, stay away from it. So I think you're right that it's only with me learning this that I've learned to taste a lot of them and then see which ones I like. I was on my honeymoon with my husband and he said, I'm going to quit my job and do something in cheese. And I said, you're nuts, whatever. And then 2 years later, we opened a cheese shop. We just decided it would be fun to work together and we'd give it a try for a little bit. And to be honest, we thought it would be like a year or 2 years. And instead, we have a personal mission to spread joy, which I think is a little bit ironic because you've just heard I was clinically depressed. And so the fact that I want to spread joy, but I think those of us who've been there know better than those who haven't. So oftentimes we can speak from our own experiences. But it just so happens now that we're getting to spread joy through cheese. So people hire us to do their weddings. During the pandemic, we're hosting about 4 of these cheese tastings. We do bigger ones every single night. So people are doing their weddings with us and anniversaries and birthday parties. And all of a sudden we have this new way to live our mission. So our personal mission to spread joy, it just so happens to be that we do it through cheese. Because if you'd asked me, was I going to be a cheesemonger? I'd have been like, no, I don't know what's a cheesemonger. For me personally, I want to make an impact in whatever I do. And it turns out, I think you can do that, whatever you choose to do in your own way. I'll hang in there. I know these times suck.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.